The search for a new house took many months. Arriman didn't want a place that was sunny and cheerful, or a place that was near a town, and though he wanted somewhere ruined and desolate, he was fussy about the kind of ghost it had. Never having had a sister, Arriman was a little shy with women, and he didn't fancy the idea of a wailing grey lady walking back and forth across his breakfast table while he ate his kippers, or a headless nun catching him in his bath. But at last he found Darkington Hall. It was a grey, gloomy, sprawling building about 30 miles from Todcaster. To the west of the hall was a sinister forest, to the north were bleak and wind-swept moors, and to the east the grey, relentlessly pounding sea. What's more, the Darkington ghost was a gentleman, and the sort that Arriman thought he could well get on with, Sir Simon Montpellier, who in the 16th century had murdered all 7 of his wives, and now wandered about groaning with guilt, moaning with misery, and striking his forehead with a plashing sound. And here Arriman lived for many years, blighting and smiting, blasting and wuthering, and doing everything he could to keep darkness and sorcery alive in the land. He filled his battlements with screech owls and his cellars with salamanders. He lined the avenue with scorched tree stumps like gallows, and he dug a well in his courtyard from which brimstone and sulphur oozed horribly. He planted a yew-tree maze so complicated and devilish that no one had a hope of coming out alive, and he made the fountains on the terrace run with blood. There was only one thing he couldn't do. He couldn't raise the ghost of Sir Simon Montpellier. He would have liked to do this. Sir Simon would have been company. But bringing ghosts back to life is the blackest and most difficult magic of all, and even Arriman couldn't manage it. The years passed. Though he seldom left the hall, Arriman's fame was spreading. People called him Arriman the Awful, Loather of Light and Wizard of the North. Stories began to be told about him, how he could make the thunder come before the lightning, that he was friends with Beelzebub himself. But Arriman just went on working. He had grown to be a tall and handsome man, with dark flashing eyes, a curved nose like the prow of a Viking ship, and a flourishing moustache, but despite his fine looks, he was not at all conceited. In the years that followed, Arriman set up a private zoo, in which he kept all the nastiest and ugliest animals he could find, monkeys with bald faces and blue behinds, camels with sneering lips and lumpy knees, wallabies with feet like railway sleepers which kicked everything in sight. He turned the billiard room into a laboratory in which fiendish things bubbled all day long, giving off appalling smells, and he called in rain clouds from the sea to drip relentlessly onto his roof. Then one day he woke feeling completely miserable. He knew he ought to get up and throw someone into his well, or order a stinking emu for the zoo, or mix something poisonous in his laboratory, but he just couldn't face it. "Lester," he said to the servant who brought him his breakfast, "I feel tired, weary, bored." Lester was an ogre, a huge, slow-moving man with muscles like footballs. Like most ogres, he had only one eye in the middle of his forehead, but so as not to upset people, he wore a black eye patch above it to make people think he had 2. Before he came to be Arriman's servant, Lester had been a sword-swallower in a fair, and he still liked to gulp down the odd sabre or fencing foil. It soothed him. Now he looked anxiously at his master. "Do you, sir?" he said. "Yes, I do. In fact, I don't know if I can go on much longer. I thought I might go away somewhere, Lester, take a little room in some pretty market town, perhaps, and write a book." The ogre was shocked. "But what would happen to blackness and evil, sir?" Arriman frowned. I know, I have a duty, I see that. But how long am I supposed to go on like this? How long, Lester?" The frown deepened and he waved his arms in desperation. "How long?" Lester wasn't the stupid kind of ogre who goes round saying fee-fi-fo-fum all the time. So now he looked at his master and said, "Well, I wouldn't know, sir. Ogres can't tell the future, you know. Gypsies can, though. Why don't you go and have your fortune told? There was a gypsy where I worked, Esmeralda they called her. Knew her stuff, she did." So the following week, Arriman and Lester drove into Todcaster to find the fair. They found Esmeralda's caravan quite easily. You could tell it from the other gypsy caravans, because the people who came out of it looked as though they didn't know what had hit them.
She tells the truth,
explained Lester, sniffing happily at the remembered fairground smells, fried onions from a hamburger stall, hot engine oil from the Dodgems. None of that garbage about dark strangers and journeys across the sea. Esmeralda was a frizzy-haired lady in a pink satin blouse. Arriman had left off his magician's cloak and changed into a grey pinstripe, but the look she gave him was very sharp indeed.
"For you, it'll be a £5, she said. "Sit down."
She pocketed the money, took a swig from a bottle labelled Gordon's Gin, and began to stare into her crystal ball. She stared for a long time. Then she pushed the ball away and lit a fag.
"It's all right," she said. "He's coming."
"Who?" said Arriman eagerly. "Who's coming?"
"A new bloke," said Esmeralda. "The one that's going to take over from you."
Arriman looked bewildered. "What new bloke?"